I was convinced yesterday when I heard Hazur's explanation, but I would like to understand and learn more about the word al-nushur, especially after I read the explanation about this word in Riwayat Wirsh.
You see, the word nushur is very indicative in this verse, and is playing a very important role, because nushuz is generally raising the people from the dead, and nushur is their redistribution all over the world. That is nashar. So we are talking of nashar here. Not only the dead will be raised, but they will be spread all over the world. And this is the meaning of nushur in that particular verse. Will you kindly read it?
So this is verse number 260 in Surah Al-Baqarah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على عروشها قال أنى يحيي هذه الله بعد موتها فأماته الله 100 عام ثم بعثه قال كم لبثت قال لبثت يوما أو بعض يوم قال بل لبثت 100 عام فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنى وانظر إلى حمارك ولنجعلك آية للناس وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسوها لحما فلما تبين له قال أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير.
Nushur.
ننشزها.
The word nushur, nunshizuha is all right. Where is the word nushur?
He says that there is another qira'ah.
Oh, understand. But in this verse there is no nushur.
No, for this verse there is another qira'ah.
Another qira'ah.
Instead of nanshizuha, nanshuruha.
That's right, I understand. This is the point, which you didn't make clear to me perhaps. My answer is the same. In this verse, but I think I should better start speaking on this verse once again, because it's a very important verse, and the Quranic handling of the subject is so masterly. It's unbelievable how this subject could be handled with such perfection. The story is, there are in fact two stories. One story says that a prophet of God passed by a ruin of a city. The city was in ruins. And he looked at the ruins and said, "Oh Lord, how could you raise these dead alive again?" Now, one thing is very important. This is the story which goes commonly among the Muslim scholars. Up to this, it's all right. But the point is, where did it happen? Which township that was? And why did he raise the question, why will you raise these people alone? Well, all the dead are raised in the hereafter. And nushuz, as I said, initially means the raising of the people from the dead. So the question one should, bring to one's focus of attention is, why a prophet of God passing through a ruin while he had seen ruins before? There are ruins everywhere. Why should he particularly ask, how will you raise these people, if he meant the raising of the hereafter, the raising the dead in the hereafter? That was a normal procedure known to every prophet. And he could not have asked God, how will you raise these people particularly after death? But Allah has raised uncountable number of people from their dead state, and no prophet inquires about it. Every prophet believes in the hereafter. So that could not have been the question. This is the story which goes according to the medieval Muslim scholars. And they answer, because the question is wrongly understood, the answer is wrongly understood. But the Quran has settled, Quran has discussed the issue in a manner that the wrong attribution of the meaning cannot be possible in this verse. Now, going back to the first, a prophet goes by a dead township, ruin of a township, and raises the question, "Oh God, how will you raise them again?" My argument is, if he had not meant raising them here in this world, it would not mean anything. Or raising them dead, the second meaning is spiritually. That could only be the possibility of the question. Because how will you raise them again in this world, physically, could not have occurred to a prophet of God. Where had God made a promise that I'll specifically raise the dead of this township here on earth? So it's a question which has to be clearly understood. What was that prophet begged from Allah? If he begged from Allah, how would you raise these people again after death? He believed in every dead being revived in the after, in the world hereafter. Why should he ask this question particularly to these people? If he meant a physical revival, who had told him that they will be physically revived? And when did it happen and where did it happen? Why should he suddenly ask God, how will you raise these people physically alive, physically into a live people from their death, from their dead bodies? That question could not have occurred in the mind of the Prophet. But the mullahs take it as that. The second thing which I believe is, a prophet of God must have heard repeatedly from divine promises that a people who would meet a physical death here on earth will be ruined. As a people, they will be raised from their spiritual ruin, not from their physical ruin. And although they are scattered, they are finished, there does not seem to be any hope attached to them. Yet God will raise them. If that promise had been made in the previous books, then a prophet can ask this question. You have made a promise that we will come to life again. And here is a township of Israelites which is so completely ruined that one simply cannot visualize a time when they will be raised again. That is, not physically, spiritually. And they will begin to rule the world once again. This could be the only question which must have stirred the mind of a prophet. That's one thing should be understood. Mullah said no, this was not the question. He passed through the township and said, "Oh God, how can you raise these dead people physically again in this world?" The answer was, Allah will make him die himself. What is an answer? Poor prophet is asking about the raising of dead people, how they will be raised. Allah said, all right, I'll cause you to die yourself. So die. And when he is awakened from that death, his own personal impression is they have lived only for one night or so. That means that the man is seeing a dream and he knows it. It is not a real death. Because when he awakens and Allah asks him, how long have you tarried? He says, only a day or a night, no more than that. Allah confirms this. Says, you're right. Look at your food. Lam yatasanna. Look at your himar. It's the same thing. Now here, the answer of God ends, and a new reference begins from here. Because when the himar is mentioned for the first time here, it is not mentioned as a bones of himar, as a carcass of a himar. It is mentioned fully as himar. And along with food being lam yatasanna, this shows that himar is also in the correct state of thing. So, the point is, what is being said afterwards? Allah says afterwards, of not the bones of himar, but bones of the people. Because here the verse comes to an end, and then another answer begins, which is a response to the prayer of the Prophet of God. Allah tells him that we made you to sleep for 100 years, which means you saw the things which are going to happen in 100 years. The rise of Israelites would require 100 years. And from then on, their return to the Holy Land and their rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon and everything will begin. This is exactly what is supported by history. It was Azkil Nabi, the Prophet of Allah, who passed through this township. He inquired from Allah, you have promised us that we are going to rule the world, and the promises you made to us are not yet over. What do I see? These people are finished. Allah says, no. He caused him to sleep and see in that sleep events of 100 years which were to come. But when he wakes up, he knows that he has slept only for a night or so. God supports this, does not reject it. You're right, look at your food, look at your himar, they're all right. But you have seen events of the 100 years, and from here the verse speaks of the dead bones of the people, spiritually dead people. That is what I explained to him. And nunshizuha, in this sense, is the revival that is spiritual revival. It is not a physical revival of the hereafter. It could not be. Because God does not do that trick in the hereafter, where the bones suddenly begin to get flesh and everything. It's not at all supported by other verses of the Quran. وَنُنْشِرُهَا فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ نُنْشِرُهَا فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. We look at the verse. Allah says, I will raise the mankind, the people, on the hereafter in a form which they do not know. So how could this verse speak of the revival hereafter, of hereafter? And the revival here was never the question. Revival of a dead people was never a question, could not have been a question in the mind of any prophet by passing through. And then the history should support, if this is the meaning, that after 100 years a full township springs from death into a full-blown people. This never happened. So the mullahs will give a lie to this verse if they insist on its physical meaning. It can neither apply to this world nor can apply to that world, but spiritually.
وَنُنْشِئَكُمْ فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ.
نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين عَلَىٰ أَن نُبَدِّلَ أَمْثَالَكُمْ وَنُبَدِّلَ أَمْثَالَكُمْ وَنُنْشِئَكُمْ فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. The point I have made clear is that this verse here definitely does not speak of what will happen in the hereafter. It does not speak of the events here on this world physically, because no township has ever come to life like it is mentioned here if it is taken physically. Why should Allah break the first part of the verse into two parts? You can see your food is not destroyed. Now, if the food was not destroyed and the donkey was destroyed, what is the meaning of this? Is this how Allah raises the things? If the food remains all right, but the live people are finished and decayed, obviously donkey there is a full-grown donkey. It's not a carcass of a donkey which is mentioned. After the verse, after this part, the people of Israel are mentioned. They will be brought back to their spiritual or political grandeur as they had lost. Now, in light of this, I read this verse again. Then you understand the points which I have made. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. No, that's a different verse. أَوْ كَالَّذِي مَرَّ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ وَهِيَ خَاوِيَةٌ عَلَى عُرُوشِهَا قَالَ أَنَّى يُحْيِي هَٰذِهِ اللَّهُ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. How will Allah raise these people? Why did you think of that? So many ruins in the world. If there were no promise, he could not have raised the question. And the promise is only spiritual, we know that. In the Old Testament there is a promise that you say people will be raised again. فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِئَةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتَ. Here's the point which I'm making. قَالَ لَبِثْتُ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. قَالَ بَلْ لَبِثْتَ مِئَةَ عَامٍ. Proof. بَلْ لَبِثْتَ مِئَةَ عَامٍ. Although you think you lived only for a day or a part thereof, you lived for a full 100, you slept full for full 100 years. And in dream it can happen. You can sleep for 100 years or 200 years as you like. فَانْظُرْ إِلَى طَعَامِكَ. But at the same time look at your food. وَشَرَابِكَ لَمْ يَتَسَنَّى. They have not gone wrong. Is that the answer to the question? The question was how the dead will be raised. And God says, you sleep for 100 years and your food does not go wrong. It's impossible, it's absurd. And then it also says, وَانْظُرْ إِلَى حِمَارِكَ. Also look at your himar. Full-grown himar is mentioned like food. It could not have gone any change. Allah testifies to the fact that really you lived only for a day or less than a day. You slept only because in that time food cannot go wrong, and in that time himar remains al-himar. Nothing goes wrong with them. But when God says, I made you to cause you to die for 100 years, here Allah makes it clear. I meant you have seen events of 100 years. I mean that your answer lies in this 100 years history. You will see the same people who will turn into bones. They will, as if they will rise from bones again. That is, spiritually they will be raised. And they will become a powerful nation. Here, Naksu Halama Falamma Tabayyana Lahu. this had to be understood. Tabayyana is not a fact which you see happening before your eyes. If he had seen bones turning into gaining flesh and rising from the dead, there is no question of tabayyana. Tabayyana means interpretation of dream. Then he realized what Allah means. Physically, he has slept only for a day. Spiritually, he has seen the events of 100 years. And through this comparison and contrast, he understood. Then, what he said, Alamu anna Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. Then he said, now I know Allah can do anything. Now, this is very clear, but the word nunshizuha is the question, word in question. What's the name, please, again?
No, Muhammad.
Muhammad. Hafiz Muhammad?
No, Shatiha Muhammad.
Huh?
Shatiha Muhammad? Sheikha Muhammad.
Sheikh Muhammad. Sheikh Muhammad Sahib wants to know the difference between nunshis and another version of the same word, which is nunshuru. Yes. Now, nunshizo is normally understood to mean nunshio. Nashat and nashar, nunshis, are normally understood to replace each other. They mean the same thing. If God does nasha, that is nashat al-ukhra as well. Nashat can take place here in this world and in the hereafter. Nushuz can take place here and in the hereafter. Both have a meaning of a sudden rise into something different. But here, because nunshizo meant in fact the revival of Israel and they spread all over the world, so another qiraat of this verse reminds you of that meaning, which is not nunshia, which is nanshuro. Nanshuro means we will spread them. And this is exactly true. After Hizqeel prayed to God where he passed through this desolate township of Israel, which Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed. It was his question which was raised. Then came Azra, another prophet of God, who rebuilt the whole township with the help of Horus, with the help of Cyrus from Syria. And from then on, the Israelites began to spread all over the world and occupy. This is nanshuro, replacing or indicating the true meaning of nunshuro. This is not just accidental. Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam must have told the people that, look, it's another version here. And this is the meaning applied. Don't misunderstand the verse. I have said all this, yet the question remains, why did not God in the first place use the word nanshuro instead of nunshuro? Because nanshuro does not apply to the dead. And the question was revival of the dead. Nushur can take place afterwards. So this is the beauty of the Quranic expression. It uses the central word which has to be used in answer to that prayer. And once raised, then they will spread. Which means that God is not talking of the hereafter. God is talking of this world. Understand? I'm sorry, but I know you can do it.
I'll try.
He has gained expertise on this and he can...
I'll try today.
I'm amazed at how he can reconstruct everything. Eh? MashaAllah.
I'll try today.
You can be brief about the first part, if you like, because we have already discussed it, some of it yesterday.
Yeah.
But come to the point which I am trying to make.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Very fine.
Okay, sir.
Allah could not tell the Prophet that time is working on you and you actually died. But the time was not working on the food, on sharab, and on donkey. What sort of time that was? It was not working physically on food and on donkey, but it was working physically on the Prophet. So it is impossible. That is why Allah said it, that you are right. Your impression is right. That you slept only for a day or a part thereof. But when we talk of that you slept for 100 years, you did as far as the future prophecies and their fulfillment are concerned. What would you say? Now, I mentioned that about 100 years after this, the rehabilitation of the Israelites' capital began, and the recollection of the Bible also began. And I mentioned that it was Ezra who ushered the new era of life in Israel. Now, I told Imam Sahib to find out what was the time distance between Iskil and this Ezra. This is 100 years. History proves it. The time between Iskil and Ezra is exactly 100 years. Or a few plus and minus, but it is one century. And it was Ezra who began not only the revival of Israel as such, but he is the one who collected all the Bible which was completely destroyed. All of the Bible, by collecting various scholars from different tribes and inquiring from them, criticizing them, telling them what you remember of the Bible you have lost completely. And then he recollected it. That is the reason why some people, some scholars believe that Bible was revealed once again to Ezra. So this is 100 years which the Quran is speaking, and how beautifully it fits into the historical situation. Now this I must say about Mr. Sheikh Muhammad. Perhaps many people don't know him. I met him for the first time in Paris, and I found him to be a scholar of profound knowledge of Islam. He is not an ordinary man. And I was afraid about him that perhaps he will be the most difficult man to handle during our question and answer. And he turned out to be the easiest person because he was God-fearing. He raised the question which was very threatening. And when I answered, he started nodding and he said, "You are right. I think another reason why you are right is this." And he quoted from Hadith, from the Quran. And I was amazed how profound his knowledge of Islam was. And now you have seen once again here. MashaAllah, Allah bless him. And may he go a long way towards spreading the message of Ahmadiyyah to all the other Muslims.